Gianna had served 1,000 drinks to dangerous men, but she'd never slipped one a death sentence until tonight. "They'll kill you if you stay," the napkin read. His response, delivered in a voice like aged whiskey and loaded guns. "Then I'll die looking at you." That's when she understood. Some warnings don't save lives, they start wars. And in the crimson-lit shadows of the Crimson Rose, she'd just declared one. Welcome back to Mafia Folklore. Before this story begins, tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it? Don't forget to smash that subscribe button, like and share. Now, let's begin. The Crimson Rose didn't sleep, it pulsed. Gianna wiped down the mahogany bar for the third time that hour, her movements practiced and invisible. Around her, the club breathed with expensive perfume and cheaper lies. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across velvet booths where men in tailored suits discussed things that would never see courtrooms. The jazz quartet in the corner played something sultry and sad, notes curling through cigar smoke like secrets looking for ears to whisper into. She'd been working here for 8 months, long enough to know which drinks to pour strong and which conversations to forget the moment they ended. Long enough to recognize the weight of a Glock beneath a dinner jacket. Long enough to understand that the Crimson Rose wasn't just a nightclub, it was a throne room, and the man who sat at the corner booth was its king. Vittorio Russo. Even his name felt dangerous in her mouth, so she never said it aloud. She didn't have to. Everyone knew who he was. The newspapers called him a suspected crime boss. The streets called him untouchable. Gianna called him nothing at all, because women who worked in places like this survived by being wallpaper, present, necessary, and utterly forgettable. Except she wasn't just a bartender. Her eyes flicked toward his usual table. He sat with his back to the wall, always, flanked by 2 men whose necks were thicker than her thighs. Vittorio himself looked like he'd been carved from marble and dressed in Italian wool. Sharp jaw, dark hair silvered at the temples, eyes that could appraise a wine vintage or a man's loyalty with equal precision. He was listening to someone speak, his expression unreadable. One hand wrapped around a glass of scotch he hadn't touched in 20 minutes. She knew because she'd been watching. She always watched. That was her real job. Vittorio Russo paid her to pour drinks and pass him intelligence. Fragments of conversation overheard between rivals. Names dropped carelessly by men who underestimated women holding cocktail shakers. She'd slip him notes folded beneath coasters. He'd read them without expression, burn them in the candle flame, and never acknowledge her beyond the transaction. It was clean, professional, safe. Until tonight. Gianna reached for a fresh glass, her pulse thrumming beneath her skin. 2 men had taken a booth near the back entrance 40 minutes ago. She'd served them gin martinis and cataloged everything. Eastern European accents trying to sound Italian. Watches too expensive for their worn shoes. Eyes that kept cutting toward Vittorio's table with the focus of wolves watching a kill. Then they'd started speaking in Italian, low and fast, assuming the American bartender couldn't understand. She'd grown up in her grandmother's house in Brooklyn, where Italian was the language of Sunday dinners and family arguments. She understood every word. Mezzanotte, one had said. Midnight. Russo muore stanotte. Russo dies tonight. The glass had nearly slipped from her hand. Now she glanced at the Art Deco clock above the bar. 11:07 p.m., 53 minutes. Her hands moved automatically, pouring bourbon for a lawyer who wouldn't remember tomorrow, mixing a cosmopolitan for a woman wearing diamonds that screamed of divorce settlements. But her mind raced through impossible calculations. Tell Vittorio's guards? They'd pat down the 2 men, find nothing, and she'd be exposed as more than decoration. Call the police? The joke would have been funny if it wasn't terrifying. Or she could do nothing. Let fate take its course. Survive by staying invisible, just like she'd been trained. Gianna looked at Vittorio again. He was laughing at something one of his men said, the sound low and genuine. It transformed his face, made him look almost human, almost reachable. She'd heard stories about him, the usual mythology that surrounded men like him. Ruthless, calculating. A man who'd built an empire on fear and had the good sense to never apologize for it. But she'd also watched him tip the coat check girl $200 because she'd mentioned her mother's medical bills. Seen him spend 20 minutes talking to the jazz pianist about Coltrane. Noticed the way he never let his men disrespect the waitresses. Monsters didn't do that. Or maybe they did. And that's what made them dangerous. The two men near the back were ordering another round. Checking their watches. She had to decide. Gianna pulled a cocktail napkin from the stack beneath the bar. Her hand trembled as she grabbed a pen. 3 words. That's all it took to cross a line she'd promised herself she'd never approach. They'll kill you if you stay. She folded it once, twice, tucked it beneath the fresh scotch she poured for Vittorio. His preferred brand, aged 18 years, neat. The glass felt impossibly heavy as she lifted the tray. The walk across the club floor stretched into eternity. Her heels clicked against marble. The jazz quartet transitioned into something minor key and melancholy. She could feel eyes tracking her movement, Vittorio's guards, the 2 wolves near the back. The general predatory awareness that lived in rooms where violence was currency. She reached his table, set down the scotch with hands she forced steady. Vittorio glanced up. Their eyes met for half a heartbeat before she looked away, training kicking in. Don't engage. Don't exist. But she existed now. The moment he reached for that glass, saw that napkin, she would exist in ways that terrified her. She turned to leave. The usual, boss, one of his guards asked. Yeah, Vittorio replied, his voice smooth as the scotch he was reaching for. The usual. Gianna made it 3 steps before she heard the pause. The quality of silence that meant he'd unfolded the napkin. Was reading her handwriting, processing the warning and the dangerous intimacy of someone caring whether he lived or died. She didn't turn around, kept walking toward the bar. Her spine straight, her breathing controlled. Then his voice cut through the jazz and conversation, quiet but absolute. Gianna. Her name. He'd never said her name before. She stopped, turned slowly. Vittorio was standing now, the napkin in one hand, his scotch in the other. His guards looked confused. The entire club seemed to tilt toward this moment, as if the universe recognized a shift in gravity. He walked toward her, not rushed, not slow, just inevitable, like a storm front moving across water. When he stood in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke, he held up the napkin between 2 fingers. They'll kill you if you stay, he read aloud, though only she could hear. His dark eyes searched hers with an intensity that made her want to run. Is that right? Her throat was dry. Yes. When? Midnight. 2 men, back booth near the kitchen entrance. He didn't look, didn't need to. You're certain? She nodded. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Then his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like acknowledgement of fate's cruel humor. Then I'll die looking at you, he said, his voice pitched low and devastating. The world stopped. Gianna's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd expected dismissal or gratitude or tactical questions. Not this. Not words that sounded like a vow wrapped in inevitability. Not the way he was looking at her now. Really looking, as if seeing her for the first time and recognizing something he'd been searching for without knowing. "What?" she whispered. "You heard me." He took a slow sip of the scotch, his eyes never leaving hers. "If tonight's the night I die, at least I'll have something worth looking at." It wasn't a joke, wasn't flirtation. It was something more dangerous. Honesty from a man who'd built a life on necessary lies. Gianna realized her mistake too late. The note wasn't just a warning, it was a confession. She'd revealed that she cared, that she'd been paying attention in ways that went beyond professional obligation. And Vittorio Russo was smart enough to read between those 7 words and find all the things she'd been hiding for 8 months. "Mr. Russo." "Vittorio," he corrected softly. "I think we're past formalities now, don't you?" Before she could respond, he handed her the scotch. "Hold this." Then he turned toward his guards, his posture shifting into something she recognized, the dangerous authority of a man used to being obeyed. "Clear the club. Everyone out except family. Do it quietly. Tell them gas leak, fire inspection, whatever. 5 minutes." The guards moved immediately, no questions. Around them, the elegant machinery of evacuation began. Polite insistence. Apologies. The jazz quartet packed up mid-song. Vittorio looked back at Gianna, and she saw it clearly now, the calculation behind his eyes, the chess game already 3 moves ahead. But beneath that, something else. Something that looked almost like gratitude. "You could have stayed quiet," he said. "Probably should have." "I know." "Why didn't you?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Around them, the club was emptying. The 2 men near the back booth were being ushered out with everyone else, confusion and frustration clear on their faces. In minutes, the Crimson Rose would be hollow, a beautiful shell waiting for violence that would now have to find another stage. Gianna looked at the man in front of her, this dangerous, complicated, untouchable king who'd just made himself vulnerable because she'd scribbled a warning on a napkin. "I don't know," she lied. But they both knew the truth. It lived in the way she was still holding his scotch like an offering. In the way he hadn't stepped back into professional distance. In the dangerous, electric understanding that something had shifted between them, and there was no unshifting it. The clock above the bar read 11:14 p.m. Outside, Death was being politely asked to come back another night. Inside, something infinitely more dangerous had just been born. Have you ever made a choice that changed everything? A moment where you knew there was no going back, but you did it anyway? Tell us in the comments below. The Crimson Rose had never been quiet before. Gianna stood in the center of the empty club, Vittorio's scotch still in her hand, and listened to the unnatural silence. No jazz, no murmured conversations, no clink of glasses or rustle of expensive fabric. Just the hum of the chandeliers and the distant sound of the last patrons being guided out into the November night. Vittorio's guards moved through the space like shadows, checking exits, securing doors. One spoke quietly into his phone in rapid Italian. Another disappeared into the back office. The efficiency was surgical, practiced. This wasn't the first time they'd cleared a room for violence, but it was the first time Gianna had been on the inside of it. "Boss?" One of the guards, a man called Enzo, whose espresso she'd been making for months, approached Vittorio. "Building's clear. Antonelli and his crew are outside. The 2 from the back booth tried to slip out through the kitchen." We detained them. Where? Loading dock. Vittorio nodded once. Good. I'll deal with them shortly. His eyes cut to Gianna. First, I need a moment. Enzo's gaze flickered between them, something like understanding crossing his face. Of course. We'll be outside if you need us. The guards filed out through the main entrance, leaving them alone in the cavernous space. The chandeliers cast long shadows across empty tables. A champagne glass sat abandoned on the bar, lipstick staining its rim. Evidence of interrupted celebration. Gianna set down the scotch carefully, her hands finally starting to shake now that the immediate danger had passed. Or maybe hadn't passed. Maybe had just changed shape. You're trembling. Vittorio's voice came from closer than she expected. He'd moved without sound, now standing near enough that she could see the fine stitching on his jacket. I'm fine. You're not. He reached past her, grabbed a bottle of brandy from the top shelf, the expensive kind reserved for special occasions, and poured 2 fingers into a clean glass. Drink. I'm working. Not anymore. Not tonight. He pressed the glass into her hand. Drink, Gianna. The way he said her name, like he was tasting it, learning its shape, made something in her chest tighten. She took a sip. The brandy burned perfectly, warmth spreading through her veins. Vittorio leaned against the bar beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. He'd loosened his tie slightly, the only indication that the last 15 minutes had affected him at all. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. How long have you understood Italian? Since I was 5. My grandmother raised me. And how long have you been listening to conversations you shouldn't hear? Since you hired me. A ghost of a smile. I hired you to tend bar. No. Gianna looked at him directly. You hired me because the last bartender disappeared after he sold information to the Castellano family. You needed someone invisible, someone they'd underestimate. Someone who could hear things and report back without raising suspicion. His eyes studied her with new appreciation. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Most people are. That pulled a real laugh from him, low and genuine. The sound did something dangerous to her equilibrium. This close, she could see details she'd never noticed from across the room. A thin scar along his jaw, barely visible. The way his dark eyes weren't quite black, but deepest brown. The silver at his temples that somehow made him more attractive rather than less. Why did you warn me? He asked again, and this time she heard the real question beneath it. Why risk yourself for someone like me? Gianna stared into her brandy. I've been watching you for 8 months, cataloging details, patterns, weaknesses. That was the job. Know you well enough to protect you from threats you couldn't see coming. And somewhere in all that watching, I started... She paused, searching for safe words and finding none. I started seeing you, not the boss, not the threat, just you. The confession hung in the air between them, terrifying in its honesty. Vittorio was quiet for a long moment, then, tell me what you see. What? When you look at me, what do you see? It was a dangerous question, maybe the most dangerous one he could ask, because answering honestly meant admitting things she'd buried deep, and lying to him now, after everything, felt impossible. Gianna took another sip of brandy for courage. I see someone who tips the coat check girl too much because he remembers what it's like to need money. Someone who listens to jazz like it's prayer? Someone who's built an empire on fear but gets quietly angry when his men disrespect women. She turned to face him fully. I see someone who should terrify me, and does, but not in the way you'd think. How then? Because I'm afraid of what happens when I stop being invisible to you. Vittorio's expression shifted, something raw flickering across his features before he controlled it. He set down his scotch and turned toward her completely. The movement brought him close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. You think you're invisible? His voice dropped to something almost soft. Gianna, I've known your coffee order since your second week. I know you bite your lip when you're worried and that you wear your grandmother's cross under your uniform. I know you read Neruda on your breaks and that you're afraid of thunderstorms but won't admit it. Her breath caught. How? Because I've been watching you too. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered, warm against her skin. You stopped being invisible to me about 6 months ago. I just didn't know what to do about it. The admission landed like a match on gasoline. Suddenly, the air between them was charged, electric with possibility and danger in equal measure. This is a mistake, Gianna whispered, but she didn't move away. Probably the biggest one I'll make? His thumb traced her jawline. I'm very good at mistakes. Vittorio. Say it again. What? My name. You've never said it before. I want to hear it again. Vittorio. It came out softer this time, almost reverent. Something in his eyes darkened. I should let you leave, should get you far away from this life, from me, from everything tonight made inevitable. But you won't. No. His hand cupped her face fully now. Because I'm a selfish bastard who spent 8 months pretending not to notice the only person who really sees me. And now that you've admitted you do, now that you've risked yourself to keep me breathing. He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching hers. I'm not gentleman enough to let that go. Gianna's heart hammered against her ribs. She could smell his cologne, feel his breath warm against her lips. Every instinct she'd honed for survival screamed that this was dangerous, that crossing this line would change everything, that loving a man like Vittorio Russo was a death sentence dressed in Italian wool. But she'd already crossed the line. The moment she'd written that note, she'd declared herself. There was no going back to invisible now. What happens next? She asked. Vittorio smiled, a real smile, not the calculated ones he wore for business. Honestly, I have no idea, but we're going to figure it out together. Then his phone buzzed, reality crashing back in. He pulled back slightly, checked the screen, and his expression hardened into something she recognized. The boss, the strategist, the man who'd survived this long by being 3 steps ahead. The 2 men? She asked. Confirmed. Bratva sent them. Russian mob trying to make a move on my territory. He pocketed the phone. They'll be dealt with. The casual way he said it should have frightened her. Maybe it did, but it also reminded her exactly who he was, what he was capable of. This wasn't some romantic fantasy. This was real, with real consequences written in blood and body counts. I should go, Gianna said, suddenly aware of how far she'd waded into dangerous water. Before your men come back? Before what? Before we acknowledge that everything changed tonight? Vittorio caught her wrist gently. Too late, Bella. The moment you decided I was worth saving, you put yourself in this story, and I'm not letting you walk back out into the cold alone. I'm not your responsibility. No. His grip tightened fractionally. You're something far more dangerous than that. You're my choice. The words hung between them, heavy with promise and threat. Before she could respond, the front door opened. Enzo stepped in. his expression grim. Boss, we have a problem. Vittorio's posture shifted instantly. Talk. The two we grabbed? They're not just Bratva foot soldiers. One of them is Nikolai Volkov's nephew, and he's making calls. Says if we don't release them in the next hour, Volkov's bringing his entire crew down on us. Gianna felt the temperature in the room drop. Even she knew that name. Nikolai Volkov, the Russian crime lord who'd been trying to muscle into Italian territory for years. This wasn't just a failed assassination. This was a declaration of war. Vittorio's jaw tightened. How many men does he have in the city? 30, maybe 40, all armed, all loyal. And we have 20 here. Another 15 we can pull in 20 minutes. The math was bad. Gianna could see it in the way Vittorio's eyes went distant, calculating odds and outcomes. We need to move locations, Enzo continued. The safe house in Red Hook. Get you somewhere defensible until we can... No. Vittorio's voice was steel. We don't run. We end this tonight. Boss! They came to my club, tried to kill me in my home. His hand found Gianna's back, protective and possessive. And they put her in danger. So no, we don't negotiate. We don't retreat. We finish this. Enzo's eyes flicked to Gianna, understanding dawning. Of course. What do you need? Call Matteo. Tell him to bring everyone, full arsenal, and get me everything we have on Volkov's operation. Warehouses, usual haunts, patterns. Vittorio looked at Gianna. You're coming with me. What? No, Not negotiable. His tone left no room for argument. You know too much now. You're involved whether you want to be or not. And I'll be damned if I let you out of my sight when there's a Russian hit squad coming. She should argue, should insist she could disappear, go home, pretend tonight never happened. But the look in his eyes told her what she already knew. She'd crossed into his world, and his world didn't let people leave. Maybe she didn't want to. Okay, she heard herself say. Okay. Vittorio's expression softened fractionally. He turned to Enzo. Give us 5 minutes, then we move. The guard nodded and retreated outside again. In the renewed silence, Vittorio pulled Gianna closer. His hand came up to cradle her face with surprising gentleness for a man about to orchestrate violence. I meant what I said earlier, he murmured. If tonight's the night I die, at least I'll die looking at something beautiful. Don't. Her voice cracked. Don't talk like that. Like what? Honest? He smiled sadly. This is my life, Gianna. It's always been borrowed time. But you... His thumb traced her cheekbone. You just made it worth fighting for. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and claiming, and edged with the knowledge that they might not survive the night. Gianna's hands fisted in his jacket as she kissed him back, pouring 8 months of secret watching and dangerous caring into the contact. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, the clock above the bar read 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes until midnight, until the moment those men had planned to kill him. But plans had changed. Warnings had been given. Lines had been crossed. What would you risk for someone you care about? Your safety? Your future? Everything? Have you ever crossed a line for love? Tell us in the comments below. And somewhere in the dangerous space between them, something new had been born. Terrifying and inevitable and worth every risk they were about to take. Ready? Vittorio asked, his hand finding hers. Gianna squeezed back. No, but let's go anyway. They walked toward the door together, toward violence and uncertainty, and a future neither could predict. But they walked together. And somehow, that made all the difference. The back office of the Crimson Rose had never felt this small. Gianna stood near the mahogany desk, while Vittorio spread a map of Lower Manhattan across its surface, his movements precise and controlled. The space smelled like leather and old cigars, masculine and lived in. Framed photographs lined one wall, Vittorio with various politicians, businessmen, people whose smiles looked expensive and hollow. But tucked in the corner was something different. A faded photo of a young boy with an older woman, her hand on his shoulder, both of them laughing. His mother, maybe, or grandmother? Evidence that he'd been human once, before the empire and the violence. Here. Vittorio tapped a spot on the map. Volkov's crew operates out of a warehouse in Red Hook. If he's mobilizing, that's where they'll gather first. Enzo leaned over the desk, studying the location. 2 other men had joined them, Matteo, who looked like he could break concrete with his bare hands, and a younger guy named Paulie, whose eyes kept darting nervously to Gianna. "We hit them there?" Matteo asked. "No." Vittorio straightened. "We hit them before they leave. Catch them in one place, unprepared. They think they have until midnight to set up their ambush. We use that." "That's a suicide play, boss," Enzo said carefully. "Walking into their stronghold with half their numbers. Which is why we won't walk in." Vittorio's smile was sharp as broken glass. "We'll make them come out." He outlined the plan, quick, brutal, efficient. Set fire to the building's east side, forcing evacuation, pick them off as they scattered. It was ruthless and risky, and Gianna could see his men calculating survival odds that weren't favorable. But no one argued. In Vittorio's world, loyalty wasn't negotiable. "Move out in 10, Vittorio ordered. "Take separate cars. Matteo, you coordinate with our guys already in Red Hook. Enzo, make sure we have medical on standby. Paulie?" "Boss." Paulie's eyes flicked to Gianna again. "What about her?" The room went quiet. All eyes turned to her, the woman who shouldn't be here, who didn't fit in this world of tactical strikes and calculated violence. Vittorio's jaw tightened. "She stays with me." "That's not protocol," Enzo said gently. "She's not trained for this. If things go bad, then she'll be where I can protect her." Vittorio's tone left no room for discussion. "I'm not leaving her here alone, and I'm not sending her home when Volkov might have eyes on this place. She stays close. That's final." The men exchanged glances, but didn't push further. They filed out, leaving Gianna and Vittorio alone in the suddenly cavernous office. She'd been quiet during the planning, watching Vittorio transform into something harder, more dangerous. The man who'd kissed her 20 minutes ago had disappeared behind layers of strategy and steel. But now, as the door closed, she saw him soften fractionally. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I can have someone take you to a safe location, somewhere Volkov would never think to look." "And then what? I hide while you walk into a war zone?" "That's the smart play." Gianna moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. "When have I ever made smart plays? I warned the most dangerous man in the city that someone was trying to kill him. I kissed him in an empty nightclub while Russian mobsters plotted revenge. Smart left the building hours ago." Vittorio's mouth quirked despite himself. "You're going to be a problem, aren't you?" "Probably." She stopped in front of him. "But I'm your problem now. You said it yourself. I'm involved. So don't try to lock me away somewhere while you go play hero." "Hero?" He laughed, the sound dark. "Gianna, I'm about to burn down a warehouse with people inside. There's nothing heroic about what I do." "No," she agreed. "But there's something honest about it. You don't pretend to be anything other than what you are." He studied her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Then he crossed to a cabinet in the corner, unlocked it, and pulled out a leather jacket. "Here, it's cold out." She took it, the leather still warm from storage. It was too big, the sleeves hanging past her hands, but it smelled like him. Cedar and smoke and something uniquely Vittorio. "Thank you." He also retrieved something else, a compact pistol, sleek and deadly. "Do you know how to use one of these?" Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "In our world, you learn to protect yourself, or you learn to be a victim." She'd spent 3 summers at a range in Queens, learning to shoot tin cans and paper targets. "Yes." Vittorio's eyebrows rose. "You're full of surprises." He checked the magazine, then held it out. "Safety's here. Don't use it unless you have to. And if you do have to..." His expression went serious. "Don't hesitate. Men like Volkov's crew won't give you a second chance." Gianna took the gun, felt its weight settle in her palm. The reality of what they were walking into crashed over her. This wasn't a movie. People would die tonight. Maybe her. Maybe him. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Good. Fear keeps you alive." Vittorio stepped closer, his hands settling on her shoulders. "But listen to me. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Whatever else happens tonight, whatever goes wrong, you stay alive. Understand? What about you? I've been doing this a long time. I know how to survive." "That's not an answer." He smiled, sad and genuine. "It's the only one I have." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression hardening. "Everyone's in position. We need to move." They walked out together into the main club. The chandeliers were dimmed now, casting long shadows. Outside the windows, the city glittered with indifferent beauty. Millions of people living normal lives, unaware that in the margins, in places like this, different rules applied. Enzo waited by a black SUV parked at the curb, engine running. Vittorio's hand found the small of Gianna's back, guiding her forward. The touch was protective, possessive, and she found she didn't mind. As they approached the vehicle, Vittorio suddenly stopped. "Wait!" He turned to face her, backlit by streetlights, and for a moment looked almost vulnerable. "If this goes wrong, it won't. If it does," he continued, "I need you to know something. What I said before about dying while looking at you, I meant it, but I'd rather live while looking at you. I'd rather have time to figure out what this is between us. I'd rather..." Gianna kissed him, cutting off the words. It was softer this time, less desperate. A promise instead of a goodbye. When they parted, she kept her hand on his cheek. "Then let's make sure you get that chance." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or hope. He covered her hand with his. "Deal." They climbed into the SUV. Enzo drove. Matteo rode shotgun, and Vittorio sat in back with Gianna between him and Polly. The vehicle merged into late-night traffic, heading south toward Red Hook. No one spoke. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Vittorio's hand found hers in the darkness between them, fingers intertwining. His thumb traced circles on her palm, a gesture that was probably unconscious, but felt intimate in the charged silence. Gianna watched the city blur past. Brownstones gave way to industrial buildings. The neighborhoods grew darker, grittier. This was the New York tourists didn't see. The bones of the city where real business happened. 5 minutes, Enzo said from the front. Vittorio squeezed her hand once, then released it. He pulled a phone from his pocket, a burner, not his usual one, and made a call. It's me. Light it up. Somewhere ahead, Gianna knew someone was setting fire to a building, creating chaos, drawing targets into the open. The SUV slowed, pulling into an alley with a clear view of a massive warehouse. Lights blazed from inside. Shadows moved behind grimy windows. People, lots of them. Volkov's crew, gathered and armed, planning their midnight strike that would never come. Then smoke began pouring from the building's eastern side, thick and black, billowing into the night sky. "Here we go," Matteo murmured. The warehouse doors burst open. Men streamed out, shouting in Russian, some coughing from smoke inhalation. Confusion reigned. They'd expected an ambush at the Crimson Rose, not to be the ones ambushed. Vittorio's men emerged from shadows, a coordinated strike from multiple positions. Gunfire erupted, sharp cracks echoing off concrete and steel. Gianna flinched at the first shots. Vittorio's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her against his chest. "Don't look," he said against her hair. "Just stay down." But she couldn't not look. This was his world, violent and unforgiving. If she was going to be part of his life, she needed to see it clearly. Through the windshield, she watched the chaos unfold. Vittorio's men were outnumbered but better positioned. They picked off targets with ruthless efficiency. Some of Volkov's crew tried to fight back. Others ran into the night. It was over in minutes, brutally fast. The kind of violence that happened in heartbeats and changed lives forever. When the gunfire stopped, the silence felt louder than the shots had been. Enzo's phone rang. He answered, listened, then turned to Vittorio. "Volkov's nephew is down, non-fatal. We have him." Vittorio nodded slowly. "Good. Bring him to the warehouse on Pier 9. I want to have a conversation." His tone suggested that conversation would be extremely unpleasant for Volkov's nephew. The SUV pulled out of the alley, heading deeper into Red Hook. Gianna's heart still hammered against her ribs. She could smell gunpowder drifting through the cracked window. Could feel Vittorio's steady heartbeat beneath her cheek where she'd pressed against him. He'd orchestrated all of this, the strategy, the violence, the survival, and he'd done it while keeping her close, protected, safe. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded against his chest. "That was terrifying, brutal, necessary. All of those." She pulled back to look at him. "Does it ever get easier, the violence?" "No." His answer was immediate, honest. "The day it gets easy is the day you stop being human. But you learn to live with it. You learn that sometimes violence is the only language certain people understand. Have you thought about, I don't know, getting out of this life?" The question felt naive even as she asked it. Vittorio smiled sadly. "Every day for the last 10 years. But men like me don't get happy endings, Gianna. We get survival. We get moments of peace between wars. And if we're very lucky, we get someone worth surviving for." His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You make me want to be lucky." The SUV pulled up to another warehouse, this one smaller, more isolated. Lights burned inside. Gianna could see silhouettes moving, Vittorio's men, and someone else. Someone bound to a chair. "Stay in the car," Vittorio said. "This part, you don't need to see this part." But Gianna caught his wrist before he could leave. "Will you kill him?" He was quiet for a moment. "Not if I don't have to. This is about sending a message, not about body counts." His eyes searched hers. "Does that change things? Knowing what I'm capable of?" She should say yes, should be horrified, should recognize that loving a man like Vittorio meant accepting darkness she'd spent her life avoiding. But she'd already accepted it. The moment she'd written that note, she'd chosen his survival over her innocence. "No," she said. "It doesn't change anything." Relief flickered across his face, there and gone. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead, tender and completely at odds with the violence waiting inside that warehouse. "I'll be back in 20 minutes. Then we'll figure out what happens next." He climbed out with Enzo and Matteo, leaving Gianna with Polly in the back seat. The young man shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how to handle babysitting duties. Through the warehouse's grimy windows, Gianna watched Vittorio approach the bound man. Even from this distance, even through dirty glass, she could see the transformation. The way he carried himself, the authority in every movement. He was terrifying and magnificent, a king in his element. She should be afraid. Maybe she was. But fear and desire had gotten tangled up somewhere along the way, and she couldn't separate them anymore. Didn't want to. "He really cares about you," Polly said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I've worked for Mr. Russo for 3 years. Never seen him like this." Gianna glanced at the young man. "Like what?" "Vulnerable. Human." Polly smiled slightly. "Usually he's different. Colder. But with you, he looks at you like you're something precious, like you're worth risking everything for." The words settled into her chest, warm and terrifying. Inside the warehouse, she watched Vittorio crouch in front of the bound man. Saw him speak, couldn't hear the words, but could read the body language. Not immediate violence, negotiation, strategy. True to his word, he emerged 15 minutes later. The bound man was still alive, still conscious. Message sent, message received. Vittorio climbed back into the SUV, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes found Gianna's, and he softened. "Let's go home." "Where's home?" she asked. "Tonight?" He took her hand again, threading their fingers together. "Wherever you are." The SUV pulled away from the warehouse, heading back toward civilization. Toward a world where morning would come, and they'd have to figure out what they were to each other. When you truly connect with someone, does it feel like home, even in the most dangerous circumstances? What does home mean to you? Tell us in the comments below. But for now, in the darkness between heartbeats, they had this: hands intertwined, hearts still racing, alive against all odds. And that was enough. Vittorio's penthouse overlooked the city like a throne room in the clouds. Gianna stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching dawn threaten the eastern horizon. Behind her, the space was all dark wood and leather, minimalist and masculine. Art on the walls that probably cost more than she'd make in 10 years. A life built on power and blood money, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. They'd come here after the warehouse. Vittorio insisting she needed rest, that his place was the safest location in the city. His men had swept the building twice. Guards were posted on every floor. The perimeter was locked down tighter than a federal prison. But Gianna couldn't sleep, couldn't stop replaying the night's violence, couldn't stop thinking about how easily it could have ended differently. "You should rest." Vittorio's voice came from behind her. He'd showered, changed into dark slacks, and a white shirt rolled to his elbows. Looking almost domestic, if you ignored the gun holstered at his side. "I'm not tired." "You're exhausted. I can see it." He moved to stand beside her, close enough that their reflections merged in the glass. "When's the last time you slept?" "When's the last time you did?" He smiled faintly. "Touché." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up. Somewhere down there, normal people were starting normal days, making coffee, catching trains, living lives that didn't include warehouse shootouts and Russian mobsters. Do you ever wish you could be one of them? Gianna asked quietly. Normal. Safe. Every day. Vittorio's hand found hers. But wishing doesn't change what we are. And what are we? He turned to face her fully. Survivors. People who've made choices that can't be unmade. People who... His phone rang, cutting off the thought. He glanced at the screen and his expression went cold. It's Volkov. Gianna's stomach dropped. How does he have your number? Because he wants me to know he's not finished. Vittorio answered, putting it on speaker. Nikolai. Russo. The voice was thick with a Russian accent, heavy with barely controlled rage. You made a mistake tonight. Did I? Your nephew is alive. Your crew scattered. Seems like I made several right moves. You attacked my operation, humiliated my family. You think this ends with a warning? Volkov's laugh was bitter. This is war now. It was war the moment you tried to kill me in my own club. Vittorio's tone was ice. You came to my territory, broke our agreements, put innocent people at risk. What did you expect? I expected you to die quickly. Now? A pause, weighted with threat. Now I'll make sure you suffer first. Starting with that pretty bartender I hear you've taken a shine to. Gianna's blood turned to frost. Vittorio's grip on the phone tightened, knuckles white. You stay away from her. Or what? You'll do what you did tonight? Burn another warehouse? Kill more of my men? Volkov's voice dropped to something deadly. I have people everywhere, Russo. Your building, your clubs, your restaurants. You can't protect her every second. And the moment you slip, the moment she's alone, I'll make sure you watch her die before I kill you. The line went dead. Silence crashed over the penthouse like a physical weight. Vittorio stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, his expression carved from stone. Then, with controlled violence, he hurled it across the room. It shattered against the far wall, pieces scattering across hardwood. Vittorio, this is my fault. He turned away from her, hands fisted at his sides. I should have anticipated this. Should have known Volkov would go after you the moment he realized you mattered. You couldn't have known? I should have. The words came out raw, anguished. This is what I do, Gianna. This is my world. I calculate risks, I anticipate moves, and I failed. I let myself get distracted, let myself feel something, and now you're a target. Gianna moved toward him carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. I made my choice. I knew the risks. You didn't know this. He gestured toward the shattered phone. You didn't know what it means to have a man like Volkov hunting you. To never feel safe again. To look over your shoulder for the rest of your life, wondering when the bullet's coming. Then teach me. She caught his arm, forcing him to face her. Teach me how to survive in your world, how to protect myself, how to be strong enough to stand beside you instead of behind you. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or a dangerous kind of hope. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. I'm asking to stay, to fight, to be more than just someone you have to protect. She stepped closer, her hand moving to his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palm. I'm asking you to trust that I'm strong enough for this. Vittorio caught her hand, pressed it harder against his chest. I'm terrified of losing you. Then don't lose me. We survive this together. He pulled her against him then, his arms wrapping around her like he could shield her from the world through sheer force of will. She felt his breath shudder against her hair, felt the tension vibrating through his frame. I won't let him touch you, he murmured. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do. He won't. The windows exploded inward. Glass erupted in 1,000 glittering shards. Gianna felt Vittorio tackle her to the ground, his body covering hers as bullets tore through the space they'd occupied heartbeats before. The crack of gunfire was deafening, endless. "Stay down!" Vittorio shouted over the chaos. He had his gun out, returning fire toward the windows. More shots came from outside, multiple shooters on adjacent buildings, a coordinated strike. How? How had they gotten past security? Gianna's ears rang. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead where flying glass had caught her. Vittorio pulled her behind the heavy leather sofa, using it as cover. "The bedroom!" he yelled. "Safe room behind the closet! Go! Not without you!" Another spray of bullets chewed through the sofa's back. Stuffing exploded into the air. Vittorio grabbed her face, forced her to look at him. "Listen to me! The bedroom, closet, back wall panel. It opens to a reinforced room. Lock yourself inside and don't come out until I get you." "Vittorio! Go! Now!" More gunfire. The front door burst open, Enzo and 2 other guards rushing in, weapons drawn. They laid down covering fire toward the windows. Gianna ran. Through the living room, down a hallway lined with shattered picture frames. Behind her, she could hear shouting in Italian and Russian. More gunfire, the distinctive sound of someone screaming. She found the bedroom, found the closet. Her hands shook as she searched the back wall, looking for the panel Vittorio had described. There, a slight seam in the wood. She pressed and it clicked open, revealing a steel door with a keypad. No code. She didn't have the code. Shit! Shit! Panic clawed at her throat. Footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, running. Gianna spun, raising the gun Vittorio had given her hours ago. Her hands trembled, but her grip was solid. Her grandmother's training. Don't hesitate, don't think, just survive. A man appeared in the doorway. Not one of Vittorio's crew. Face she didn't recognize. Gun raised toward her. She fired first. The recoil kicked through her arms. The man stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. Not dead, but down. More footsteps. She couldn't tell if they were friend or enemy. Then Vittorio was there, appearing in the doorway like a dark angel, gun smoking. He took in the scene, her standing there with a weapon. The downed man bleeding on the floor, her terrified but alive. "You shot him," he said, something like pride flickering across his face. "He didn't give me a choice." "Good girl." Vittorio crossed to the safe room door, punched in a code, 0815, she noticed, and pulled it open. "Inside, now." But Gianna grabbed his arm. "What about you?" "I need to clear the building. Make sure Volkov's men are neutralized." "Then I'm coming with you." "Gianna?" "No!" She surprised herself with the vehemence. "You said we survived together. That means you don't get to lock me away while you play hero. I can shoot. You just saw that. I can help." Vittorio stared at her, warring emotions crossing his face. Finally, "Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" She nodded. They moved through the penthouse together. Vittorio leading, Gianna close behind. The main room was a war zone. Furniture destroyed. Bullet holes in the walls. Blood on the floor. 2 bodies near the windows. One of Vittorio's men being field-treated by another. Enzo appeared from the hallway, his face grim. "Building's clear. We got 4 of them. 2 escaped down the fire escape." "Casualties?" "Tommaso's hit. Non-fatal. Everyone else made it." Vittorio's jaw tightened. "And security? How the hell did they breach?" "Inside job. One of the night guards was on Volkov's payroll. He's been dealt with." The words hung in the air. Dealt with. Gianna understood what that meant. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Someone had called the cops. They'd be here in minutes. "We need to move," Enzo said. "Police show up, find this mess, start asking questions." "I know." Vittorio turned to Gianna. "We can't stay here. Volkov knows this location. He'll send more." "Where do we go?" "I have a place, outside the city, secure." His hand found hers, squeezed. "Pack light. We leave in 5 minutes." The next few minutes were a blur. Gianna grabbed essentials, the clothes on her back, the gun, Vittorio's leather jacket. Around them, his men moved with military efficiency, clearing evidence, securing weapons, preparing to disappear before the authorities arrived. They descended via a private elevator that opened into an underground garage. 3 SUVs waited, engines running. Vittorio guided her into the middle vehicle, sliding in beside her. As they pulled out into the pre-dawn streets, Gianna looked back at the building. Smoke drifted from the upper floors. Police cars were converging from multiple directions, lights painting the darkness red and blue. Everything had changed in hours. Her job, her safety, her entire life. Vittorio's hand found hers in the darkness between them. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For bringing you into this. For making you a target. For—" She kissed him, cutting off the apology. It was brief, fierce, tasting of blood and gunpowder and desperate hope. "Stop apologizing for letting me choose," she said against his lips. "I chose this. I chose you. And I'd do it again." His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against his chest. She felt his heart hammering, felt the tremor in his hands that betrayed how close to breaking he was. "We're going to survive this," she whispered. "Both of us. Together." "Promise me." His voice cracked. "Promise me you'll survive." "Even if I don't." "No." She pulled back to look at him. "We both make it, or we don't make promises we can't keep." Something in his expression shifted, fear giving way to determination. "Then I guess we both survive." The SUV merged onto the highway, heading north out of the city. Behind them, Manhattan glittered in the rear-view mirror, beautiful and deadly, the only home Vittorio had ever known. But home, Gianna was learning, wasn't a place. It was a person. A choice. A risk worth taking, even when the odds were impossible. She leaned against Vittorio's shoulder, feeling his arm tighten around her. Outside the windows, the world blurred past. Trees and darkness and the promise of somewhere safer. They'd survived the night. Barely, but they'd survived it together. And that had to count for something. The safe house sat on 20 acres of woodland 2 hours north of the city, hidden behind iron gates and sophisticated security systems that would make a military base jealous. Gianna stood on the wraparound porch, watching morning paint the trees gold and amber. The air smelled clean, pine and earth and distance from violence. Birds sang, oblivious to the fact that the man inside had spent the night orchestrating warfare. Behind her, she could hear Vittorio on the phone, his voice low and controlled as he coordinated damage control. Paying off witnesses, cleaning up crime scenes, rebuilding the empire that Volkov had tried to tear down. 3 days had passed since the penthouse attack. 3 days of forced proximity in this beautiful prison, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It hadn't. Yet. The door opened. Vittorio emerged carrying 2 mugs of coffee, looking exhausted but somehow lighter than he had in the city. He'd abandoned the suits for jeans and a Henley, barefoot on the weathered wood, almost human, almost safe. "Couldn't sleep?" He handed her a mug. His preferred blend she'd learned to make exactly how he liked it. Too quiet. I'm used to sirens and car alarms. Give it time. The quiet grows on you. He leaned against the porch railing beside her. Enzo called. Volkov's crew has gone underground. No movement for 48 hours. Is that good or bad? Could be either. Either they're regrouping for another strike, or they're cutting their losses. He took a slow sip of coffee. Either way, we hurt them badly. They'll think twice before coming at us again. Us. The word settled into Gianna's chest, warm and terrifying. She was part of an us now, part of something larger and more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. What happens next? She asked. Vittorio was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the trees. I've been thinking about that. About what I told you in the penthouse. How I wish I could be normal. Safe. Vittorio? Let me finish. He set down his mug, turned to face her fully. I've spent 20 years building an empire. 20 years making decisions that kept me alive, but cost pieces of my humanity. And I told myself it was necessary, that this was the only way to survive in our world. His hand came up to cup her face. Then you walked into my life with your impossible courage and your grandmother's cross and your belief that I was worth saving. And suddenly, for the first time in 2 decades, I started wondering if maybe there was another way. Gianna's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying I want out, not immediately. I can't just walk away from everything I've built without consequences, but gradually, strategically. I want to transition power, clean up my operations, find a way to leave this life that doesn't end with a bullet. He searched her eyes. And I want to do it with you. Build something new, something that isn't soaked in blood and fear, something that looks like the future instead of the past. Tears blurred her vision. Vittorio, that's impossible, naive, a fantasy. He smiled sadly. Maybe, probably, but you made me want impossible things. You made me believe that a man like me might deserve something good. You do deserve it. She grabbed his shirt, pulled him closer. You deserve peace. You deserve love. You deserve a life that isn't constantly looking over your shoulder. So do you. His forehead touched hers. Which is why I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. Do you want this? Not just me, but everything that comes with me? The danger that might never fully disappear? The past I can't erase? The reality that some threats don't have expiration dates? His voice dropped to something raw. Because I can give you money, new identity, set you up somewhere safe where Volkov and men like him will never find you. You could have a normal life, Gianna. You could walk away from all of this. She pulled back enough to see his face clearly. Saw the fear there, the terrified hope of a man offering her an exit and praying she wouldn't take it. I don't want normal, she said firmly. I want you. I want this. Whatever it looks like, whatever it costs. I want to be there while you figure out how to leave this life. I want to help you build something new. And yes, I want to do it knowing that Volkov might come back, that danger might always be part of our story. She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his racing heart. Because, here's the truth, I was invisible my whole life, safe and small and forgettable. And then I met you, and suddenly I was seen. I mattered. I was brave enough to risk everything for something real. Tears spilled down her cheeks. So no, I don't want you to give me money and send me away. I want to stay. I want to fight beside you. I want to watch you become the man you're meant to be. the one who exists under all the armor and fear. Gianna, I'm not done. She smiled through her tears. I'm saying I love you, Vittorio Russo. I love you despite the danger, despite the past, despite every logical reason I shouldn't. And I'm choosing to stay. So stop trying to save me from you, and let me save you right back. The words hung in the morning air, irreversible and true. Vittorio stared at her like she'd performed a miracle. Then he was kissing her, desperate and reverent, like he was trying to memorize the moment. His hands cradled her face like she was something precious, breakable, worth protecting with everything he had. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. God help us both, but I love you. Then we'll figure it out together. Together, he repeated, like testing the word's weight. Then he smiled, a real smile, the kind that transformed his entire face. You know what? I think we might actually survive this. We already have. He kissed her again, softer this time, promising. When he pulled back, there was something lighter in his expression, as if a weight he'd carried for 20 years had finally started to lift. Come on. He took her hand. I want to show you something. He led her inside, through the safe house to a room she hadn't explored yet. It was small, intimate, wood-paneled walls lined with bookshelves, a brick fireplace, leather chairs that looked lived in and comfortable. A refuge within a refuge. My grandfather built this house, Vittorio said quietly. Before the family went deeper into the business, before things got complicated, this was supposed to be a place where we could be normal, where we could remember what it felt like to be human. He moved to the fireplace, picked up a framed photograph from the mantel. A young boy with an older man, both of them laughing, fishing rods in hand. That's him, my grandfather. He tried to get out once, tried to build a legitimate life. It didn't work. The family pulled him back in. He died when I was 12, still trapped in a life he'd wanted to escape. Vittorio set down the photo carefully. I promised myself I'd be smarter, stronger. I'd build an empire so powerful that no one could touch me. And I did. But I forgot the most important part of his lesson. What was that? That power without purpose is just a prettier cage. He turned to face her. You gave me purpose, Gianna. You reminded me what I was fighting for, not territory or respect or fear, connection, love, a future worth surviving for. He crossed to her, took both her hands. So here's what I'm proposing. We stay here for a while. Let things cool down in the city. I'll start the process of transitioning power to people I trust, clean up my operations, make them legitimate where I can, distance myself from what I can't clean. How long will that take? A year, maybe 2. It won't be fast, and it won't be easy. There will be pushback, challenges, maybe even more attempts on my life. His grip tightened. But at the end of it, I'll be free. We'll be free, and we can figure out what our life looks like when it's not dictated by violence and survival. Gianna's heart swelled. You'd really do that? Walk away from everything you've built? I'd do it for you. I'd do it for us. I'd do it for the chance to wake up every morning without wondering if today's the day someone succeeds in killing me. He smiled. Besides, my grandfather always said the smartest move is knowing when to leave the table. I think it's my turn to be smart. She threw her arms around him, holding tight. We're really doing this. We're really going to build something new. Yeah. He held her just as tightly. We really are. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other and the promise of a future neither had dared imagine a week ago. Finally, Gianna pulled back. "So, what do we do first?" "First?" Vittorio grinned. "First, we have breakfast, because I'm starving, and planning a criminal empire's dissolution is much easier on a full stomach." She laughed, real laughter, the kind that felt like freedom. "That's your master plan? Breakfast?" "Hey, even revolutionaries need to eat." He laced his fingers through hers, started leading her toward the kitchen. "Besides, I make excellent pancakes. It's one of my hidden talents." "The feared mafia boss makes pancakes?" "The former mafia boss," he corrected. "And yes, my grandmother insisted every man should know how to feed himself. It's probably the most useful thing she ever taught me." They moved into the kitchen together, a bright space with copper pots and morning light streaming through windows. Vittorio started pulling out ingredients while Gianna perched on a stool at the island, watching him move with easy competence. It was so domestic, so normal, so perfectly at odds with everything the last week had been. And yet, it felt right, like a preview of the life they were fighting to build. "Gianna?" Vittorio looked up from measuring flour. "Yeah? Thank you for seeing me, for staying, for believing I could be more than what I've been." His expression was soft, vulnerable. "You saved my life that night in the club, but more than that, you gave me a reason to want to live it differently." She came around the island, wrapped her arms around him from behind. "You did the same for me. You made me brave. You showed me I was stronger than I thought. You gave me something worth risking everything for." He turned in her arms, kissed her forehead. "We're going to make it, you know. Despite the odds, despite Volkov, despite everything trying to tear us apart." "I know." And she did. Deep in her bones, past logic and fear, she knew. "We already survived the hardest part. We found each other. Everything else is just details." "Just details," he repeated, smiling. "I like that." Outside the windows, the world continued, dangerous and unpredictable, full of threats they couldn't control. Volkov was still out there. The past wasn't erased. The future wasn't guaranteed. But in this moment, in this kitchen filled with morning light and the promise of pancakes, they had something more valuable than safety. They had each other. They had hope. They had a plan to build something better. And sometimes that was enough. Vittorio returned to making breakfast, and Gianna watched him. This complicated, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man who'd chosen her when he could have chosen empire. Who'd decided love was worth more than power. Who was brave enough to imagine a different ending to his story. The pancakes were, in fact, excellent. They ate on the porch, watching the sun climb higher, painting everything gold. Somewhere in the distance, Gianna heard Vittorio's phone buzz with updates from the city, the empire still needing its king, even in exile. But he didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, he reached for her hand. "You know what the irony is?" he said quietly. "What?" "I spent 20 years trying to make myself untouchable, trying to build walls so high that nothing could hurt me. And then you slipped me a note that said 7 words, and every wall I'd built came crashing down." He squeezed her hand. "Best worst thing that ever happened to me." Gianna laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is, the highest one I can give." He pulled her closer, wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Here's to dangerous women and impossible choices, and the gamble of loving someone when the world wants you dead." "Here's to surviving anyway," she added. "To surviving anyway." They sat like that as morning stretched into afternoon. two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and decided that was exactly the right time to fall in love. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Vittorio would spend months carefully dismantling the empire he'd built, making sure his exit didn't trigger more violence. Volkov might strike again, or he might fade into the background, another threat neutralized by time and distance. There would be setbacks, challenges, moments when the past reached out to drag them backward, but they'd face it together. And in the end, that was the only guarantee that mattered. Not safety, not certainty, but partnership. Two people choosing each other, day after day, despite every reason not to. As the sun reached its peak, Gianna leaned her head on Vittorio's shoulder and smiled. She'd walked into the Crimson Rose 8 months ago, looking for a paycheck. She'd found a king in hiding, a man worth saving, a love worth fighting for, and herself, braver, stronger, more alive than she'd ever been. "What are you thinking?" Vittorio asked softly. "That I'd do it all again. Every dangerous, terrifying, impossible moment. Even knowing how it turns out? Especially knowing how it turns out." She tilted her face up to kiss him. "Because this, us, here, alive and together, this is the best ending I could have imagined." "It's not an ending," he corrected gently. "It's a beginning." "Then let's begin." And they did. Love in dangerous times requires impossible courage. Have you ever fought for something or someone when everyone said you shouldn't? What's the bravest choice you've ever made for love? Tell us in the comments below. Thank you for watching this story until the end. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and click on the next video. It is darker, deeper, and even more unforgettable. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story, and comment your country or city. Your support helps us create more contents like this.